tuning in to the final part of our Madigan Simpson Desert adventure. If you haven't watched part 1 to 3, they are available on YouTube and Patreon. The last night we spent close to Camp 4. Camp 2 and 3 are unfortunately out of bounds at the moment due to its cultural sensitivity. We came across quite a few of these plants which looked like little bush tomatoes. At this stage we didn't know really what it was and were wondering whether you could eat them.
Or something.
Yeah, it sort of looks like it.
Maybe Dan knows, huh?
I'll have to ask him.
Scotty, are you gonna be the real life food tester to see whether it's edible?
No.
No.
Let's have a look if Dan knows what these bush tomatoes are. Yeah.
Madigan Highway.
Yeah.
How they taste?
Gross.
Gross?
Really sour.
Do you know what it is?
Full of seed, no.
Definitely not right. The ones we saw were bigger.
Through later research I found out it belongs to the Solanum family, and while there are 2 edible versions, there are also quite a few poisonous versions, so I would not recommend trying them unless you can identify the correct one 100%. We came across these beautiful zebra finks. They disperse far if the conditions are favorable. And while they usually drink every day if water is there, they can also survive for months just on seeds and plants material without any extra water. They usually occur in big flocks and the male and female pair bond for life. So quite an interesting little bird. With the fine sand and dust, I was glad to be in the cruiser this time, as it seals much better than my old Defender and the dust ingress in the vehicle was far less. Another flock of budgies showed that we were nearing the end of the desert. Once more we discovered a few dromedaries in the bushes. While it is interesting to see them in the wild, we should keep in mind that these are feral animals and they do not really belong into the Australian bush. Next we reached 2 rocky outcrops called the Twins. They are on the fringes of the desert, and on top of one is still a cairn and a plaque created by C.T. Madigan. So it's worthwhile to park your vehicles and climb on top of the Twins and enjoy the view and have a look at the old cairn. And you can leave a note in the tin, which is still there. And off we went again, heading towards Andado Station. The landscape really had changed, and instead of cresting dunes, we now were on wide open plains. Shortly after we came across this old derelict tractor. No idea why it ended up there, but it still had rubber on the tires, it still had belts on. We assumed it got bogged during one of the floods and was just abandoned. Came across a big dam with a lot of water in, which really made it apparent that we were nearly back into civilization. Our next stop then was the old Andado Station, where we decided to have lunch and air up our tires. The bore still had a defunct windmill and an old water tank without any water in. This is where Madigan Camp 1 is supposed to be, the real one. But someone It seems like someone stole it. Still some boxes with messages in, but there's no marker anymore. That's a little message box.
That's all that's left.
Our second last stop was at the McClark Conservation Area. It is one of 3 locations in Australia where Australia's rarest tree still grows, which is called the acacia pus or aratara in the Arunda people's language. It is one of the hardest trees in Australia, and supposedly a 22 caliber rifle bullet will not penetrate it. It also was used by the indigenous community to make waddies, a kind of club which was used for hunting and fighting.
The acacia pus, also known as the waddy tree, and it is the rarest tree in Australia and only found in 2 locations, most prolifically here and on the far side of the Simpson Desert, about 12 kilometres north of Birdsville. The tree actually used to be a lot more prolific through this area, but when they came through clearing land for the pastoral leases, which is all that remains today. Well, it's part of the acacia family.
Yes.
And the acacia family is very much dominated by these like needle-like leaves that push upwards because they're very much a desert-orientated plant, and that's how they collect their water. So in the morning they get the condensation, and it's designed to run down the leaves and trickle down the trunk into the root system.
Okay.
And you'll find that most plants in the Simpson Desert will have this needle-like shaped leaf that's always pointing upwards.
Our final stop of the trip was Old Andado Station, which is like stepping back in time. I have a separate video of that, which you can find in the cards on top of the screen. Cobby, who was the last caretaker of Old Andado Station, knows it since his childhood, and he used to stay there when he was a child, so it's a beautiful step back in time, him explaining some of the history. What do you do water-wise here? There's a bore, I would think?
But we've got a bore over near where the old windmill is.
Yes.
The bore's there. We've got the best water from Cooper Pedy to Darwin.
I have, yeah.
Because we're in a stream, not in the artesian basin itself.
Okay.
And our water's only 15 metres below.
So I would like to give a big shout out to Denis Bartell, also called the Desert Walker. I don't think there's any person who crossed the Simpson Desert more often than him. Be it by foot, dragging a cart behind him, by four-wheel drive or camel. Denis was also the first person to recreate David Lindsay's failed Simpson Desert crossing, and Denis rediscovered all 11 native wells. He kindly allowed me to use some footage from his expeditions, and I can only highly recommend to have a look at his website and read the book The Desert Walker, or watch his DVD.
But it was on the 13th day, I think, that the greatest pleasure. I could recognise, I thought, the tone of the country. And I know this area pretty well out here. And I thought, right, I'm not going to continue on any further south. I'm going to take a gamble and head to the west, or westwards. And I climbed this big dune, and I knew what was going to be on the other side of that the moment I climbed it, before I even got to the top. And I could recognise it immediately. I hadn't been there for years, but that's where David Lindsay passed through Bullabutna and Palani native wells. And that was a thrilling moment. The first time in 13 days, I positively knew exactly where I was.
When explorer David Lindsay passed through this country on camels in 1886, he wanted to become the first European to cross the Simpson Desert. Setting off from Dalhousie Springs, Lindsay's party headed east, following a string of native wells located for them by an Aboriginal guide. Lindsay was forced to turn back after passing Popel's Corner, and it was another 50 years before an adventurous cattleman, Ted Colson, and a young Aborigine rode their camels across the desert and into Birdsville. 3 years later, in 1939, an Adelaide geologist, Dr. Cecil Madigan, led the first scientific expedition through the Simpson. The exact location of Lindsay's native wells remained a mystery until 5 years ago, when they were rediscovered by Denis Bartell, who followed the directions laid down in the explorer's journal. The well Walporican is under the sandhill on the west side of the plain, and there are some prickly corkwood trees nearby, one of which, 10 chains west of the well, I cut my initials and nailed up a tin plate on which is stamped D. Lindsay, 1886. Bartell recovered the blazed tree and delivered it to a museum in Adelaide. But the well and its promise of drinkable water was a much more exciting find.
David Lindsay, the explorer, in 1886 came through here, and he used this well, or he used a whole chain of them, but this one was one of those wells that he used to water his camels.
There are at least 10 wells like this one, described by Lindsay, but the water is often difficult to reach. Once the drill breaks through a layer of black mud, a bailer is lowered on a string and the precious cargo brought to the surface. After the sediment settles to the bottom, the water is quite fit to drink.
Yeah, we unfortunately reached the end of the final episode of our Simpson Desert Madigan crossing. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and maybe you even help me out on Patreon and support my expeditions. Keep in mind, if you had any memorable desert experiences, please leave me a comment in the comment section. I'm keen to hear other people's stories and adventures. All my videos are self-funded, and the advert revenue doesn't even cover one tank of fuel. So if you enjoy my videos, it would be greatly appreciated if you could support me on Patreon. These will also give you early access to most of my videos. In particular, I would like to thank Dan Wood, Scott Mason and Denis Bartell. All three of them contributed to this episode.